I grew up always knowing I wasn't the golden child in my family. My parents' attention was almost entirely centered on my younger sister, Emma, who could do no wrong in their eyes and seemed to have endless second chances no matter how badly she messed up. Meanwhile, I learned early on to rely on myself. I put my head down, worked hard, and got through college with a patchwork of scholarships and part-time jobs, eventually carving out a steady career with a solid income. Even with all that, my parents never really acted impressed or proud. For years, I tried to swallow it and keep moving, convincing myself that one day they'd respect me for standing on my own 2 feet. But while I was grinding away at building my life, Emma's was spinning out of control. She rushed into marriage young, only for it to collapse 2 years later after her husband cheated. Not long after, she jumped into a second marriage, had 2 kids, and then watched it crumble when her husband developed a gambling addiction that cost them their home. By the time I was finally establishing my career, Emma was already onto her 3rd husband and raising 6 kids, ranging from a 12-year-old down to a toddler. Her new husband was scraping by with part-time delivery gigs and some half-baked attempt at starting a business, but they could barely cover the basics. And of course, my parents were always right there to cushion her falls. They'd pay her bills, cover emergencies, and constantly justify why she needed just a little more help. For a while, I stayed focused on my own lane and tuned out Emma's chaos. But then I noticed something strange. My parents suddenly started treating me differently. They called more often, bragged about my job, invited me over for dinners, and even showered me with compliments about how successful I'd become. After a lifetime of being overlooked, I honestly wanted to believe this meant they were finally proud of me. So when they asked me over for dinner last month, I went in thinking maybe we'd turned a corner. At first, everything felt normal. We caught up on work, talked about small family updates, and for a brief moment, I actually felt included. But then the tone shifted. They started going on about Emma, about how impossible it was for her to raise 6 kids on so little income, about how they had stretched themselves to the limit trying to help her. Then came the kicker. They reminded me how fortunate I was to have a great career, no dependents, and the means to give back to the family. And then they dropped the bombshell. They wanted me to take over financially supporting Emma. This wasn't just covering the occasional bill, they had mapped out an entire plan. First, they expected me to buy her a brand new 5-bedroom house because her rental was too cramped. On top of that, they wanted me to set up college funds for all 6 of her kids since I was the only one who could afford it. Then came the demand for a monthly allowance, $5,000 every month, to handle living costs and bankroll her dream of launching a mommy blog business. Altogether, they were essentially asking me to commit around $2 million upfront, plus ongoing support. I sat there stunned. This wasn't a favor, they were basically asking me to become Emma's lifelong ATM. That's when it hit me. All that sudden attention and praise from my parents wasn't pride, it was strategy. They had buttered me up because they saw me as Emma's financial safety net. I told them straight that I was fine pitching in during emergencies or for small things here and there, but there was no way I was agreeing to bankroll her life. The mood flipped instantly. My mom burst into tears, accusing me of abandoning family when they needed me most, while my dad flat out called me selfish and ungrateful. They said this was proof of the kind of person I'd become, and that they were deeply disappointed in me. By the end of dinner, they stormed out furious. I hoped that would be the end of it, but within hours, my phone blew up with angry messages from Emma. She accused me of dooming her kids' futures, and then she had her children send guilt-tripping texts saying things like, "Uncle doesn't love us anymore." It was non-stop until I finally blocked their numbers. I sat there stunned at how quickly it all escalated just because I refused to bankroll her life. The next day, my grandmother, my dad's mom, called me out of the blue. Apparently, my parents had already gone around bragging to the entire extended family about how I was going to step in and fix everything for Emma. They had painted this picture of her moving into a brand new home, debt-free, with all her kids' futures secure thanks to me. Now that I had said no, they were embarrassed and scrambling. My grandparents were horrified when I explained the truth. They had always assumed Emma's lifestyle was being propped up by her husband's, with my parents helping here and there by choice. They had no idea my parents had run themselves into debt constantly rescuing her. They were so disgusted by what they heard that they told me outright they planned to cut my parents out of their will. Instead, they wanted their estate to go to me and my cousins, the ones who actually worked hard and weren't leeching off others. Once that got around, the whole family started to split into sides. Aunts and uncles reached out apologizing for not noticing how differently I'd been treated all these years. My mom's sister even called to tell me she regretted not stepping in sooner. Meanwhile, my parents went into meltdown mode. My phone lit up constantly with them alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas. One minute I was ruining Emma's kids' lives and would regret it someday, and the next they were begging me to reconsider because family takes care of each other. The whole thing has left me torn in knots. I can't shake the guilt, because I was raised to believe family comes first, but at the same time, I'm exhausted from trying to earn love from people who only reach for me when they need something. Deep down, I know if I give in now, I'll be stuck carrying Emma's entire family on my back for the rest of my life. So here I am, laying it all out because I don't know what to do. Do I hold firm and protect my boundaries, or is there some middle ground I'm not seeing? I could really use an outside perspective. Update 1: Things have only gotten messier than I imagined. Just days after I opened up to my grandparents about everything, they weren't bluffing, they actually went straight to their lawyer and changed their will, officially removing my parents from any inheritance. My grandparents have always been quiet, peacekeeping people, so for them to take such a drastic step was shocking beyond belief. But apparently, this situation and years of favoritism toward Emma was the breaking point. And they didn't stop there. Not long after, my grandparents decided enough was enough. They set up a family meeting to finally lay everything out on the table. Since some of us live further away, including me, they arranged it as a big conference call so nobody could claim they were left out. From the way they hinted about it beforehand, I already suspected they were going to reveal things I hadn't even known myself. On the call were a mix of aunts, uncles, and cousins, basically anyone close enough to be affected by the mess my parents had created. Once everyone joined, my grandparents wasted no time. They went straight into it, announcing that for years they had been quietly sending my parents large amounts of money, over $200,000 in total, with the understanding that it was supposed to be divided between Emma and me to support our education and future plans. I felt like the air got sucked out of the room. Here I'd been scraping through college on scholarships, student loans, and endless part-time jobs, struggling to juggle classes with shifts, while Emma breezed through life cushioned by constant bailouts. I never saw a single penny of that money. My grandparents' voices shook with anger as they explained how betrayed they felt. They had been crystal clear with my parents that the money was for both of us, yet it had almost entirely gone toward Emma, propping up her failed marriages, rent, and who knows what else. They demanded my parents provide a complete breakdown of where every dollar had gone, even threatening to involve lawyers if they refused. For a family as private as ours, that was earth-shattering. But I could tell my grandparents had reached their breaking point. Then came another shock. They announced that they would be creating trust funds for all of their grandchildren, including Emma's 6 kids. But this time the money wouldn't pass through my parents' hands. Everything would be managed by an outside trustee and locked down for specific uses like education or healthcare. The message was clear: they didn't trust my parents or Emma to have access anymore. For the first time, I felt some relief. At least Emma's kids would have a chance at stability without being robbed blind. After that meeting, everything blew up. Relatives started contacting me left and right as they pieced things together. Turns out, this wasn't the first time my parents had asked family for money under false pretenses. One aunt admitted she had loaned them several $1,000s back when Emma's second marriage collapsed, thinking it was for essentials. A cousin recalled my parents asking for contributions when I started college, supposedly to help me get on my feet, even though I never saw any of it. Some relatives were furious at being misled, while others were just heartbroken realizing the extent of my parents' favoritism. One cousin even shared screenshots of old messages from my parents around the time of my college graduation. They had told people not to come, claiming I wanted to keep it small and didn't want a big celebration. In reality, I had desperately hoped family would show up. It felt like another gut punch realizing how far they'd gone to downplay my accomplishments, while pulling out all the stops for Emma. And then Emma herself started reaching out. She sent me these long, rambling emails, each one with a different angle. In one, she tried to play the supportive sister, claiming she never realized how much favoritism there was and how she always thought we were close. In another, she painted herself as a victim too, saying our parents had manipulated her and blinded her to the truth. But no matter the tone, each message included a subtle request for help: money for the kids, money for bills, money for her supposed fresh start. It was surreal. Even after everything, after our grandparents had stripped my parents of inheritance and exposed years of favoritism, Emma still found a way to make it about what I could give her. She acted like we were suddenly best friends, but it was obvious she still saw me as her personal safety net. I refused to let her pull me back into that role. Meanwhile, my parents launched their own campaign against me. They left endless voicemails, one moment my mom screaming that I was tearing the family apart and that I'd regret this forever, the next moment my dad softly pleading that we could fix things privately and avoid making a big deal of it. They even tried to guilt-trip me by saying I was putting my grandparents in an awkward position, that if the family fractured it would be on my conscience. But their words weren't sticking anymore. My grandparents stood firmly behind me, and the rest of the family had started to see my parents' true colors. Some relatives even reached out to say they were proud of me for finally standing up for myself. My aunt, my mom's own sister, called me crying, apologizing for never realizing how differently I was treated. She told me she had always assumed I was naturally independent and didn't need as much help, when in reality, I had been forced into that role because all of my parents' energy and resources went straight to Emma. More messages trickled in from cousins, aunts, and uncles, sharing their own apologies or memories of things they'd noticed but hadn't put together at the time. It was bittersweet. On one hand, I felt validated, finally people were acknowledging the years of sacrifices I'd made on my own. But on the other hand, it reopened old wounds. It made me relive every moment I'd felt invisible, every time I wondered why my successes never seemed to matter. Now it all made sense, but that didn't erase the pain of growing up second best. Even after all of this, my parents still won't admit they've done anything wrong. They're obsessed with how this makes them look to the family, more worried about reputation than the actual damage they've caused. To them, I'm just being dramatic and stirring up conflict that should be smoothed over for the sake of peace. But here's the thing, I don't feel guilty anymore. For the first time in my life, I'm realizing the importance of setting firm boundaries, even with family. If I give in now, it'll just mean years more of being drained financially and emotionally. I'm done being their scapegoat and Emma's bank. My grandparents have promised me they'll handle things if my parents keep pushing. They've made it clear I don't need to shoulder any of this and even said they're ready to take further steps to protect me if necessary. For once, I feel like I'm finally in control of my own life. Knowing I'm not carrying this weight completely alone anymore has changed everything for me. Still, I find myself asking what family even means at this point. For most of my life, I thought being a good son and brother meant putting everyone else first, sacrificing my own needs just to keep the peace and make sure everyone else was taken care of. But now it's clear there's a limit. Family shouldn't treat you like an ATM, or dismiss your happiness whenever it's inconvenient for them. As things keep unfolding, I've been sticking to my decision, but there's a nagging part of me that wonders if I should be handling this differently. Maybe there's something more I should be doing. I'm trying to take it one day at a time, but the whole situation is a lot to process. Honestly, I'd appreciate any advice on how to move forward from here. Update 2. Just a few days after my grandparents announced the changes to their will, my parents finally broke their silence. Instead of apologizing or admitting they might have crossed a line, they sent me this long, carefully written email that was clearly meant to justify every decision they'd ever made. In it, they didn't just defend their favoritism toward Emma, they actually framed it as something to be proud of. They called it an investment, saying Emma had always been more family-oriented, while I was independent and career-focused. In their eyes, that apparently meant I didn't need as much support. Then they tried to spin their demand that I fund Emma's life as nothing to do with money. It was, according to them, about balancing things out and giving her the same advantages they believed I'd already had on my own. To make it sting even more, they accused me of being selfish for not wanting to share my so-called excess with family. And it didn't stop there. They attached a detailed list comparing everything they'd supposedly spent on me versus Emma. It included basic childhood essentials like food and clothes as though those were special investments. For Emma, they had wedding expenses, house payments, therapy bills after her divorces, and even a bizarre line item calling her emotional support during her teenage years value incalculable. Reading it, I realized they must have been keeping mental score for decades, probably waiting for the chance to throw it all back at me. What made it worse was that they didn't just send it to me, they circulated the email to the entire extended family, hoping everyone would see me as greedy and ungrateful. But the plan backfired spectacularly. Relatives who had stayed neutral until then started reaching out, saying they were horrified by the email. More than one told me it felt absurd that my parents were billing me for basic parenting duties. Some even apologized for not realizing sooner how much favoritism I'd been up against. My parents clearly thought people would rally around them, but all they did was push everyone even further away. Meanwhile, my grandparents' lawyer got involved. They'd always believed the money they gave my parents over the years was being split equally between Emma and me for our education and necessary expenses. Finding out it had been funneled into Emma's weddings and failed relationships was the final straw. The lawyer formally demanded my parents provide a full account of where the money went, and my grandparents were ready to take it to court if needed. Honestly, I couldn't blame them. The whole thing felt like I'd stumbled into a tangled web of lies that had been woven for years, all while I was left out in the cold. Then, in an unexpected twist, Emma's first ex-husband reached out. He's the father of her two oldest kids, and although we'd never been close, we'd always been polite. He told me he'd heard about what was happening and wanted to share his perspective. According to him, my parents had pressured him into marrying Emma when she got pregnant, dangling financial support as long as he agreed. I knew they'd married quickly, but I had no idea my parents were pulling the strings behind it. He explained that most of the financial help he received back then actually came from the money my grandparents were sending, money they thought was meant to help both Emma and me. He even apologized for not standing up to my parents back then, saying he regretted letting everything spiral the way it did. When my parents realized their email wasn't having the effect they wanted, they scrambled to backtrack. They sent out a follow-up message to everyone claiming the first email had been written in anger and wasn't meant to be taken literally. But nobody was buying it. The original email was so detailed and carefully crafted it might as well have been notarized. Walking it back now only made them look even more dishonest. Emma, who had been silent for a few days after the family meeting, started contacting me again too. Her tone shifted, less guilt-tripping, more desperation. She wrote a few emails saying she had always loved me, that she hadn't realized how unfairly our parents treated me, and that she never wanted to burden me. Then, almost in the same breath, she'd pivot to how difficult things were at home: 6 kids, a husband whose business was struggling, her children struggling in school because of the stress. Some of her messages were almost whiplash, nostalgic childhood memories in one sentence, veiled requests for money in the next. I'd be lying if I said it didn't tug at me a little. Her kids are innocent in all this, and it's painful to imagine them suffering. But I can't ignore the truth either. Emma has known about the favoritism for years, and instead of pushing back against it, she leaned into it. Now that the safety net is gone, she's suddenly trying to pull me in as her replacement. The emails didn't make me angry so much as sad that she still doesn't understand boundaries, and sad that I can't trust her not to use me. More family members started coming forward with stories of their own. One of my aunts called to apologize for never saying anything back when she noticed the imbalance. She remembered specific moments when my parents dismissed me while fawning over Emma, but at the time she didn't want to interfere. She even admitted that she once offered to help me with college applications, only to have my parents wave her off, insisting I had it all under control. In reality, I was drowning, working shifts, filling out applications, and juggling everything completely on my own. She told me she felt guilty for not stepping in when she had the chance. Family group chats have turned into a minefield. Relatives keep messaging, asking if I need anything, offering to support me however they can. It's strange. I've spent most of my life feeling invisible, and now suddenly everyone is reaching out. I appreciate it, but it also feels surreal, like a spotlight I never expected or asked for. It all became overwhelming after a while. Part of me felt strange even accepting so much support from relatives, because I'd already survived the hardest years on my own. Most of the time, all I could do was thank them awkwardly, not really sure what else to say. Even my parents' closest friends began stepping back. Some of them had believed my parents' story, that I was a selfish workaholic who didn't value family, but after reading that email and hearing more details, they began to see through the excuses. A few even apologized, admitting they had misjudged me. One friend told me my parents had borrowed money from them, supposedly for family needs, and now they realized they might have unknowingly been financing Emma's lifestyle. Through it all, my parents refused to let up. They kept hammering me with messages, insisting I owed them for everything they'd done for me. According to them, I was responsible for keeping the family together, and by refusing to support Emma, I was tearing everything apart. They accused me of ruining their reputation, hurting Emma's children, and destroying the family bond. It was frustrating to no end because they were blind to their own actions, pretending none of this was their fault. Despite all that pressure, I've stayed firm. I won't let myself be guilted into fixing the problems they created, nor will I shoulder responsibility for Emma's choices. It's still hard to wrap my head around the fact that this is my own family, that things have escalated to the point where I'm forced to choose between my own well-being and what they call family loyalty. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that I finally have a voice, and people are hearing me. That alone feels like progress. Update 3, things have now reached some kind of conclusion, one I don't think anyone saw coming. My grandparents, after seeing just how deep the dysfunction went, decided to draw a line in the sand. They called one last family meeting, this time with their lawyer sitting right there beside them. It felt like the closing of a chapter, though you could feel the tension in the air, with so many wounds still raw and unresolved. This meeting wasn't just about talk, they came with action. They announced that they weren't only updating their will, but were making immediate changes with their assets to prevent any more abuse. For years, my parents had been living rent-free in a family-owned vacation property. It had originally been offered as a temporary arrangement, but my parents treated it like their permanent home, fully expecting it would eventually be handed down to them. That assumption ended right there. My grandparents declared they were selling the property, and the proceeds would be used to establish educational trusts for all the great-grandchildren, Emma's 6 kids included, along with my cousin's children. To remove any doubt, they also laid out a new system: annual educational grants for family members pursuing higher education or professional certifications. These funds would be managed by an independent trustee, with zero family involvement. In other words, no more accidental diversions. Watching my parents' reaction was surreal. Losing their free housing was a blow, but realizing they would never again have access to my grandparents' estate left them looking shaken and defeated. For once, they didn't argue, maybe because they knew it was useless. My grandparents handed them a formal notice giving them 60 days to move out, with no extensions. The lawyer even had them sign paperwork on the spot. To everyone's shock, my parents also admitted to misusing the educational funds my grandparents had sent years ago. Hearing it out loud hit hard, and many family members were disgusted. With no other option, my parents signed a repayment agreement. It's going to hurt them financially, and they'll be moving into a small apartment once they leave the property. Their lifestyle, built for so long on free support, is gone. They'll have to learn how to actually budget and live within their means. Emma, on the other hand, seems to finally be facing reality too. With my parents' safety net disappearing, she knows she can't depend on them to cover her bills or step in every time her husband's plans collapse. Instead of more guilt trips, she's taken real steps forward. She enrolled in a vocational program for medical billing and coding, something that could give her a reliable career and a chance to support her kids herself. Her husband has picked up extra delivery shifts, trying to contribute more to their household. Emma even emailed me again, but for the first time, it wasn't a plea for money. She just asked if I could help polish her resume. I agreed. It felt like a small way to help without enabling her dependence. The most surprising part has been hearing from Emma's kids. Through their father, her first ex-husband, I learned my grandparents arranged for them to attend family therapy. Those kids had been stuck in the middle of all this dysfunction, carrying confusion and guilt they didn't deserve. Therapy is giving them the tools to understand favoritism, manipulation, and family boundaries. The older ones even apologized for the guilt-tripping texts they had sent me early on, saying they hadn't realized how much pressure their mom had put on them. They told me they were sorry for being used against me. I reassured them it wasn't their fault, their kids, just following a parent's lead. I only hope therapy helps them see that none of this mess is theirs to carry. As for my parents, they're struggling to accept the new reality. Lately, they've been sending me old photos of my childhood with captions like, "Remember when we were a happy family, and don't forget who's been there since the beginning." I can't tell if these are genuine attempts at reconciliation or just another manipulation tactic. Some messages paint them as victims who sacrificed everything, others as abandoned martyrs cast out by the family. They've also been telling anyone who'll listen that the family turned against them, trying to twist the narrative as if they were the innocent ones just trying to help Emma. But by now, most people see through it. Relatives are keeping their distance, polite but detached. For me, this whole experience has been eye-opening. I never realized just how deep the favoritism ran or how long I'd been manipulated into silence. My grandparents have shown a strength and fairness I'll never forget. They've made sure safeguards are in place so the next generation won't have to go through what I did. It hasn't been easy, but it's been necessary. This ordeal showed me who truly cares about me, and who only saw me as a resource to exploit. In the end, I'm grateful for the people who stood by me and for the chance to finally step into my own life with clear boundaries. And with that, I think I can finally close this chapter.